Thank you, Jeff, Tim, and Greg, for putting all these together. And it's still morning, yes, so good morning, everyone. My name is Tolu Omotoso with NRECA, Director of Energy Solutions. I bring greetings from DC from all my colleagues, so thank you for having me here. I think this is actually my second time in Minnesota in 6 months, so that's a record, I guess. Oops, sorry. Okay. We've kind of talked about, some of these transmission issues, the policy, and then also integrated resource planning like Zach just talked about. So for me, I'm going to be looking at things from a little bit different perspective, what is actually happening behind the meter. So what are our consumers doing behind the meter, and then how can we still maintain, that relationship engagement like Derek talked about in terms of providing those energy services and needs to them. So I work within the business and technology strategies team at NRECA. So we're a group of engineers and scientists. We just kind of like track technology and then also provide these solutions back to our members. So within my portfolio, I cover distributed energy resources, which is wind, solar, battery storage, and microgrids. So just a little bit of note here. We, like I said, within my department, we have a ton of professionals. So we cover a lot of topics, and we don't try to prescribe solutions to members because, we are a national organization with different member needs across the nation. So whatever I'm presenting today is just some fact in terms of where technology has been and where it's going, as we've seen from our members. So it's not professional advice, and we are not endorsing any particular technology or vendor. So with that out of the way, this is my outline. I'm talking about the membership, how things have kind of changed a little bit behind the meter and where things are going. And then also overall industry trends, challenges and opportunities. And then we'll also talk about a little bit about NRECA's position on all of these things. And then I'm going to touch on virtual power plants, which is kind of like one of the questions you asked earlier today, kind of leaning towards that side in terms of how do you leverage all this asset behind the meter from your solar array to maybe microgrids, and then also bringing value to the membership and then also to the utility. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the consortium approach to the BIL. I think Derek also mentioned they're working on this big grant here in Minnesota. That's really good. So I will talk about what we are doing at the national level on behalf of all the co-ops. So first, utility members of the future. So what we are seeing actually, things have changed from 1939, 1936, when electric cooperatives started serving membership. We're seeing members now wanting to be more engaged with their utility, right? So how many people have a smartphone here? Everybody, yeah. So there's really no rotary phone anymore anywhere. Some people still have it, but and then also the way we consume things has kind of changed, right? I think there's only one Blockbuster store in the US right now, somewhere in Oregon. I wonder why it's still there. Everybody watches Netflix now. So the same thing is happening, right, with the electric grid. Things have changed, regardless of what is happening in front of the meter, also at the very high level, policy level, with generation, transmission, and everything like that. The way members consume and interact with the grid has changed, right? So in addition to having smartphones, we have all the smart apps, right, where you can use to track your energy use. You have your solar, you have your battery storage. So people have moved, right, from being just a transactional rate payer, which was the case before, to now the point where you're a prosumer, with all of the assets you have behind the meter. And then we're seeing that this transition is moving, right, to where you would want this transumer kind of people on the grid where they're pretty much smart. So you are generating and consuming electricity at the same time. And this is where we see that the industry is actually going. So, and this is being driven by a lot of the things that we've spoken about today, from, decarbonization and then also decentralization and digitalization of the grid. So the way we would interact and solve member problems in the future also has to evolve with these things that we are seeing change behind the meter. Then, in terms of the trends, Zach mentioned this a little bit now in terms of the cost. We've seen a decrease in cost over the past 10 years, drastic decrease in the cost of solar and also battery storage. There's been a little bit of uptick in the last maybe 1 or 2 years, due to, supply chain issues. I think COVID pretty much threw everybody for a loop, right? So for the past 2 or 3 years, we've been trying to figure out how to get back to our normal lives before COVID. So there's been a little bit of uptick in the price of these renewables, but in the long term, what we're expecting is these prices to continue to drop. And as they drop, you see there will be more people kind of installing assets, both behind the meter and also in front of the meter. And then when you see all of these new renewables come on, both large scale and small scale, what is happening is that there's a lot of queue, on the transmission level to interconnect these large scale renewables on the grid. So currently, I think this might be a little bit old, but currently we have about 930 gigawatts of solar just waiting to be interconnected. And I think Derek also mentioned this as part of the things that need to be improved to make sure that we can actually get some of these mandates in place. Because if you have all of these mandates and whatever, and there is really no improvement in these permissions to interconnect, then it really makes no sense. Then the other thing that we have been looking at is extreme weather, right? So over the past 5 years or so, we've had a lot more of these extreme weather events occur than the last probably 15, 20 years combined, right? So almost every year now, there's going to be a reasonable expectation of some hurricane or whatever, which damages more than $1 billion each in areas like Florida and then also other areas on the coast. So these extreme weather events keep occurring more and more every year. So we have to do stuff to make sure that we can still provide power reliably to all our members behind the meter. Then, okay, we've already talked about this, so I'm just going to skip this one. MISO came up with an updated number yesterday, so this slide is very old right now. The other thing looking at is the levelized cost of energy. So by the time you look at everything all together, and Zach also mentioned this, you want a balanced portfolio, so you just invest in maybe Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden, your money just goes away, right? So you want a balanced portfolio also for the electric grid. And then part of what we are seeing is the levelized cost of energy and comparing, all these various sources of energy, because that's the only way you can make sure that you are making the best financial decisions for your members. Overall, renewables are still providing very good value for money, and I think it's going to be improving as we move down the line. Then, where NRECA stands on this, and that's where I started with my little bit of disclaimer, because NRECA represents the interest of almost 900 electric cooperatives in Washington, D.C. So part of NRECA's job is advocating on behalf of all these co-ops. And we want to do that in such a way that everybody is kind of satisfied. And you can imagine how difficult that is going to be. So what we are trying to say here is that we are focusing on providing reliable, affordable power to our members, regardless of the sources where these energies are coming from. We are, committed to the energy transition, but we want to do that in a very, very safe way to make sure that, the whole goal of having electric cooperatives in terms of providing power to rural and remote areas is not kind of jeopardized with, some of this very aggressive transition. Then now kind of trying to bring all of this together, from some of the congestion we have in front of the meter and to the members already installing all of these assets behind the meter. How do we leverage these new resources, right, and put it into this basket that Zach was talking about, right, to provide safe, reliable power to the membership? So then there's this concept of virtual power plants that I'm going to be going through. And before I go there, just looking at the grid itself as a whole, so Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, they provide this graphic every now and then. And looking at the entire grid, when you generate, transmit, and distribute power to the end use, about 60% of that energy is actually lost. So from the generation to transmitting to distributing. So in a way, the grid itself is very inefficient, in quotes. So the more that you can generate these energy sources very close to where they are consumed, right, the better it is for everybody. So if we have renewables that are closer to where they are being used, it means everybody wins, right? So sometimes it might not match one for one, right? Even if you have like a solar or battery storage in terms of your generating source, it might be a little bit more expensive than having your coal plant somewhere. But by the time you look at it as a whole, in terms of the entire grid and then some of the losses that you would encounter, some of these generation that are closer to the source are better for you in terms of the overall cost. So then now down to virtual power plants. So, I mean, what is a virtual power plant? Virtual means it's kind of like there, but not there, right? So it's there when you need it, right? And then it just goes away when you don't. So being able to aggregate, assets behind the meter, solar, battery storage, smart thermostat, smart water heaters, things that you can actually use to regulate supply and demand on the grid. Aggregating all of this together, providing capacity on the grid is essentially what a virtual power plant is. And this is a quote from Jigar Shah, who is the director of the Loan Programs Office. So the U.S. spends about $10 billion every year balancing the grid, right? So when you have all these projections from ISO, we're going to have maybe high temperatures in the summer or whatever like that. So during those periods of elevated demand on the grid, you have to fire up maybe peaker plants or some coal plant that wasn't supposed to be running before. So balancing all of that costs about $10 billion a year. So what if we can, divert some of those things behind the meter, where you have your members that have actually installed some of these assets and are just sitting there, right? If we can leverage those assets and then also provide some benefits to the members for being able to use their devices behind the meter. So both residential and then also commercial and industrial members. And there was a pilot kind of that was carried out, in the Kaiso territory, I think, last year with Tesla. So I think about 2,500 homes were able to participate in that. They got about $2 per kW compensation and supplied 18 megawatts to the grid during that period, that pilot period. And, people actually made money from that. So there's this guy that just captured this from the internet where Tesla sent him his check. So for allowing his utility to use his battery behind the meter during the period of grid congestion, he made about $600, right? So as we go on and there's more opportunities to leverage all of these assets, we can actually save a lot of money from building bigger transmission, building bigger plants, and also helping members behind the meter. Because now, if you have assets that you can actually make money off of, I don't think this guy was expecting to make $600 a year on his Tesla Powerwall, but now that is an opportunity. And I will show another slide as we move forward. There are tons of these assets just sitting there behind the meter. So being able to leverage that is going to save the utility a lot of money. It's going to save the GNT a lot of money. And it's going to make a lot of money for the members behind the meter, which is a win-win-win scenario for everybody involved. So I have some friends at Generac, and usually when I do these talks, I just tell them, hey, can you just give me a snapshot of what is behind the meter at this location? So this is just Generac alone. So Generac has about 80% market share in the generator area, and I know you guys also have a generator program, which is good. So overall, across the nation, there is about $2 million home standby generating sets right there. And some of these are ready to be kind of like leveraged, and some of them are not. But this is just the scale of what is there. About 30,000 batteries from Generac alone. There are other manufacturers, and about 4 million thermostats. So if we start looking at all of these, then you see that there is actually this huge opportunity, right, to leverage these assets and make money for everybody that is involved in it, and then also save a lot of money for the utility. So, and the other thing driving some of these installs, like I showed earlier with extreme weather events that keep, rearing its head almost every year, they've seen a huge uptake in Florida just because of the continuous hurricane, every other year, every year. So they've peaked at, I think, about 200 installs per week since January 29. And you can see there are some spikes right there. When you see like a really, really big spike that are here and here, it's always after there is an hurricane event. Because all of a sudden you have this hurricane, people lose power for a few days, and you'll be like, okay, you know what? I can't do this anymore, right? So I need to get something to carry me through whenever this happens. And this is the opportunity for virtual power plants in Minnesota. So they sent me this screen grab for all of the co-ops, I think, in Minnesota. So, like I said, again, this is just in Iraq because there are other manufacturers and then also other thermostat providers. But for now, I think they have about 6,000 home standby generators that could actually be leveraged into all these virtual power plants. And since you guys already have a generator kind of program, I think this is another area that can be, beneficial if you have not already started doing that. Then, now the question is, how do we actually, roll out all these programs, or how do we fund them? Well, the good news is we have a lot of money from this bipartisan infrastructure law. Yeah. So this is the biggest, as I've heard, investment in the grid ever, right, since inception. I mean, I wasn't here when the grid was built, so I wouldn't know, but what people are saying is this is the biggest investment in the grid. It's, I think about $1 trillion in this bipartisan infrastructure law, and several departments have several billions of dollars to spend. So there's the GRIP funding, which I think you guys are also part of, about $10 billion. There is the OECD ERA funding, which is another $10 billion. USDA just released their own guidance 2 days ago, which our leaders at NRECA worked closely, with the government to make sure that this money actually benefits co-ops. So what we have done at NRECA is to group this funding opportunity in 5 different topic areas. So we're looking at cybersecurity, we're looking at electric vehicles, we're looking at microgrids, natural hazards, and then also smart grids and data. So I lead the microgrid consortium for NRECA, and then it's also a clean energy consortium. So what we're trying to do is to look at opportunities to help electric cooperatives actually apply for this funding, because sometimes, especially the smaller co-ops, right, there are some maybe challenges in terms of going after this funding, from grant writing to the grant implementation and everything like that. So we are providing that service to the membership, right, at the national level. So anyone that is interested in joining the NRECA effort, you can pretty much join any of these consortia online. So currently we have, about 250 co-ops that are part of this, 400 member staff, 33 GNT. We also have assured members that are part of this, and that is the geographic spread of our consortium as a whole. Like I said, it's money for everyone, right? So I got this somewhere. I think this was when Oprah was giving everybody cars, So there's a ton of money. And the old, kind of like backstory, or the point here is we need to capture as much money as possible for the cooperative and then also for the members that we serve. So for our GRIP funding, which was submitted, I think, a few days or weeks ago, we have 39 cooperatives with wildfire mitigation, about $100 million. Storm hardening, about 14 cooperatives with that, $60 million. And then we also have DERMS, DERMS, SCADA, whatever, $200 million for that, for about 70 cooperatives. And also, when I was preparing for this talk, Tim told me Lake Region also submitted for GRIP, for substation projects, utility battery scale, and then also residential battery projects. The other thing, aside from the GRIP, we're also working on the OECD ERA concept papers. So we've turned in the concept paper. We're waiting for the DOE to give us a go-ahead to submit full applications. So across all of that also, it's about, I think, close to $200 million of projects that we've submitted on behalf of co-ops. About maybe 79, 80 different co-ops. Some of them are getting to different projects across these topic areas that you can see right here. Then, in addition to that, aside from what the utility can benefit from, there are also direct benefits to consumer members, from this IRA, and then some of them, there are rebate programs that you can use to pretty much make your house more energy efficient. Some of them you can buy heat pump, water heaters, heat pump, HVAC systems, which come at a very, very significant discount. And I think the way they are trying to do these rebates for now is to make it at a point of sale. So you don't have to send in any forms or whatever like that. You just go, whatever you buy to get your discounts at a point of sale, and then it's done. So they are still trying to come up with ways to actually roll out this program. It's already at the state level, so we will be tracking these as things come out. So also, there's also grants for the manufacturers to make stuff, in the U.S. Part of what we are talking about is supply chain, because some of these things you have to source them, maybe from, nations that are not so friendly to the U.S. So there is a lot of money in here for manufacturers to actually make this, clean energy projects in the U.S. Then there's also stuff for contractors. So in addition to the consumers, the manufacturers, the contractors that are installing, these devices or this, equipment in our members' homes also have, some form of money to spend, right? So there is contractor rebates for qualifying era projects, and then also they have some money for training and also workforce development in their territories. So I think that's the end of my slide. I don't know if I still have some time to take some questions.
Okay. I think we're maybe we can take one question. There's one question back here before we bring up Julie Lucas from Mining Minnesota.
Okay. Hello, my name is Brian.
Hey, Ryan.
And this is piggybacking off of the first question regarding microgrids and generation and the collaboration with our co-ops. I believe that RECs are uniquely positioned to leverage its member investments in generation and storage in a virtual way to accelerate the transition in a capital efficient way. I think your presentation directly hit on that area. So my question is threefold. How can RECs accelerate standards, pilots, rate innovations, and shared investment incentives? You highlighted some federal opportunities, but how can we actually get it done at the local level? Again, this is why I believe co-ops are uniquely positioned to lead the country in this manner. What are the current roadblocks from a permitting hardware and or software to VPP? And lastly, again, how to get it done. How can we educate members of the opportunity to participate in this collaboration and help with design and planning if individual members or small businesses are looking to make these investments?
Very good question, Ryan. I always love getting questions in areas where I'm working, so I don't have to really think about an answer because I already know. So thanks, Ryan. One of the things you mentioned is in terms of how we can educate members, on all these things, and then also roadblocks for virtual power plants. So I'm going to start from the beginning in terms of how we actually do this. So we have a pilot right now running at the NRECA level, and we are focusing on large multi-site energy users, CNI accounts, right? So they have all of these goals behind the meter, right? All these ESG goals they need to meet and everything like that. And our pitch to them is, hey, we can all work together to come with a win-win-win scenario in all of these cases. So for example, the project I'm actually working on, I'm going to try not to name names, but we have a large retailer that we're working with right now, and they are looking to install a renewable energy and microgrids behind their meter. So we have about 3 cooperatives that are in this pilot, and we're looking at developing joint projects with them such that we can fund these projects through the electric cooperatives by leveraging, all of this federal funding. And these private companies can also come in with maybe some of the cost share, right? And there are different value stacks for them. So for the cooperatives, their main goal here is to maybe save some money, either through peak shaving or peak shifting. So we use the microgrids for that. For the retail, giants or whatever, multi-site energy users, one of their major things is resilience. So in those areas like in Florida where you have multiple hurricanes and then you have to go off maybe generating sets for a couple of days or weeks, that is expensive. And then also in addition to that, you lose a lot of money from having to dispose, perishable goods, that are in the freezer. So for that, they will be using these systems for resilience purposes. And that way, value stacking those joint projects makes it a lot more financially viable for everybody involved. Because by the time you calculate how much it will cost you, right, to throw away all of those goods and then also run on gen sets for maybe a couple of weeks, it's cheaper to develop those renewable energy projects as a microgrid behind the meter with your utility where they can also benefit. So, and then with that, once we are done with this pilot, it should maybe end by the end of the year. We would have a kind of like a business plan, business model using that pilot, and then we can share that through our business and technology strategy reports that we give out maybe occasionally through the co-ops. Then I think lastly, you talked about roadblocks for virtual power plants. We are still trying to kind of like figure out that. Right now, there are a lot of roadblocks in terms of standardization, right? Maybe connecting to all of these utility AMI systems, and then also making sure that you can select one provider and be able to connect to multiple devices. So we don't know what that is going to look like yet. We're actually running a survey right now to capture some of these concerns from co-ops and then also from vendors. And once we are done with that, we will also release a report to share with everybody.